You're going to need that.
Let me know when you guys are ready.
On the roll.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Donna Martin. I'm the Public Information Officer for Greene County. We're excited to be here today to give you an update on the ongoing work at the county regarding the CARES Act Relief Fund program. Today you'll be hearing from Presiding Commissioner Bob Dixon, Commissioner John Russell, Commissioner Harold Bench, and CARES Act Grants Administrator Dr. Lyle Foster. We'll be happy to answer your questions at the end, and with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Dixon to get us started.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you to the press for being here. Thank you for interpreting for us. I appreciate it. We'd like to welcome everyone. As you know, the U.S. Congress passed the Coronavirus Relief Fund earlier this year to promote recovery, $34.4 million of which the state legislature designated to Greene County to be distributed back into our community. Of course, the County Commission wants a just and equitable process, and we have been very pleased with the way that process has gone thus far. The Advisory Council, which I'll talk about in a little bit, will be subdivided into several categories, which will review and score applications and then be forwarded to the County Commission for final approval. Commissioner John Russell will discuss that process with you in greater detail. I also want to say that we're very grateful and we're very pleased with our in-house staff who once again have saved taxpayer dollars by providing the excellent service that they do. And Commissioner Harold Bench will discuss some of that with you in greater detail as well. As we announce the CARES Advisory Committee and the leadership, I would like to pause and just explain the purpose and the provenance or the origination of these funds. First, let me speak to the purpose of the particular funds. These are intended to provide support and benefit to a number of organizations that serve the citizens of Greene County. However, the direct recipients will be Greene County businesses, organizations, and others, including units of government of those citizens. These organizations, businesses, and units will apply and explain how they how they lost revenue due to the adverse economic consequences of the pandemic and the necessary but economically disruptive public health responses to limit death and disease, and how best they and their organization can utilize those funds. Second, but more importantly, I think we all must remember that the provenance of the funds is the American taxpayer. Let us remember all of those funds, in the end, will be repaid by the county and our citizens. Therefore, the disbursement of the funds should benefit the majority of taxpayers in the county. We believe an open and transparent process will help assure our citizens that these funds will not merely flow to the better positioned or the favored organizations, but will be directed to a variety of meritorious organizations across the whole of Greene County who apply for the funds. If we do this right, and we believe we are, people will trust the funding decisions that are made and know that the process was made with high regard for all Greene County citizens. To that end, we have developed an expeditious application. The process goes like this: application, deliberation, recommendation, and then the determination. Next, the applications will lead into the deliberative phase, led by Dr. Lyle Foster and his team assembled, the community-led advisory committee we are announcing today. Let me just say that we are extremely pleased with our decision to contract with a professional in Dr. Lyle Foster a convener in our community who has done great work. And by the way, the compliments are already rolling in from citizens, organizations, and even other counties. Commissioner Bench will also discuss some of that with you. Let me also say that his recommendation and thoughts on assembling this advisory committee were very well received by the commission, and that's why we're taking this step to announce the 30 individuals who will make up the Citizens Advisory Committee. And dare I say, you will note that this is probably, without doubt, the most professionally, demographically, and geographically diverse board that Greene County has seen. We're very proud of that. All recommendations of the advisory board will be subject to Missouri constitutional and statutory rules regulating disbursement of these sorts of public funds, with a final public vote of the commission. Now, I know that there will be some, and have been a few already, who due to very important need have called for a more rapid disbursement of the funds. We're very mindful of these many pressing needs. We have seen them up close and personal. But an approach that values haste will not only lead to waste, it risks losing the public's trust in the process. And it also risks leaving many people and organizations who merit a seat at the table completely out of the process. This must and will be an open, transparent process. You know, the laws, the regulations, and the rules that are made are done so to center us in time of crisis. And what a crisis we have seen in 2020. Our bedrock principles are the foundations upon which we must stand when the winds of chaos chafe all around us like a hurricane. If we all take a step back from the urgency of the moment, and that is what we at Greene County are trying to do, I think we will agree that no one should be allowed to cut the line to get ahead or push their way to the front. When we truly embrace the values of collaboration, which Commissioner Bench in his many years has lived and seen, and we're grateful for the example. When we accept our fellow man or our woman, that they all have equal cause for concern, and when we direct the benefits to the many and not merely to the favored few, when we look beyond the edge of our own lives and see our neighbors and our fellow citizens, it's in these moments that we truly return to our ideals, our ideal selves, and we become the community that we have always hoped to be, and we actually are. So with that, I am very pleased to be able to ask Commissioner John Russell to come to the podium and give you a little bit more detail on the subcommittees and some more of the process. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Dixon, and thank each of you for joining us here today. I'll just start out with saying that the Commission absolutely understands just how important these CARES Act funds are for our community. And that's why we've been working so hard behind the scenes for weeks and weeks. This needs to be a process that is equitable. It needs to be a process that is accountable, and a process that is transparent. These funds need to be dispersed with clear principles and a public process in mind. So it is important that we must have a process that is respectable and easily understood. And that is what we have. There is something crucially important to remember. The entire process will be open to the sunshine of public review. And I've got to thank Dr. Foster and many others at the county who have worked for weeks and weeks behind the scenes to get us to this point. Let me touch a little bit on the schedule. I think this has been released, but just as a reminder, we had no way of knowing exactly how many applications would be received. So to help streamline the process, we had dates for each individual category. Yesterday, the initial applications for nonprofits and community organizations ended, and starting today through July 29th will be healthcare. Small business will be July 29th through August 3. Education, July 31st through the 5th of August. and taxpayer-supported entities, August 5th through 10th. In addition, we've broken the categories. We've broken the funding into various categories. Taxpayer-supported entities will be allotted $6.5 million, and each of these will be reviewed by the subcommittees. Small business, $6.5 million. Nonprofits and community organizations, $5 million. Healthcare, $8 million. Education, $4.6 million. And we've also held a 10% contingency, so roughly $3.4 million, to consider possible emergencies or other needs that might arise in the fall. It's important to note we are being so deliberative with our processes and procedures to be equitable, transparent, and accountable. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Bench for some additional thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner. You have heard both Commissioner Dixon and Commissioner Russell mention things going on behind the scenes. And I'd like to just stress those for a moment. Never in the history of any county in the state of Missouri have they had this much money just dropped upon them with instructions from the federal government: use it right, and you will be audited as how you use it. And the guidelines were somewhat ambiguous to a certain extent, so a lot of discussion had to take place between the state treasurer of Missouri and the Treasury Department of the United States, along with counties, as to what do these mean, what is expected. Chris Coulter, our county administrator, pulled together a team early on consisting of our county auditor, Cindy Stein, Justin Hill, our county treasurer, and Jeff Scott, our county budget officer, along with our public information officer, Donna. Their job was to put together a template that then would be followed as we prepare for bringing this 30-member committee together. And that was no small task, because one of the biggest challenges facing everybody was, how are we going to manage this magnitude on a computer system that doesn't exist? So our IS department went to the market to see what is there that might be used to manage this process. And they found some systems, but they would have been using a lot of this money for those systems. And they said, we can build a system if you give us the correct parameters that we need to assure will be in place. And that's what that team did. Now, Jess, our IS director, pulled together his team, and just in a few days, they had built a system that manages this program. And as Dr. Foster will be sharing with you, there's a lot that goes into it. I can't tell you how important their activity was. And it saved the county well over $30,000 of these funds. And I think that's something our taxpayers should be appreciative of. The job of the county, as you have heard lined out now, is to assure the public that these monies are spent in an appropriate manner with complete transparency. That is what we intend to do. But to do that takes a person who is skilled in management, something of this magnitude. And we did a search in our community. And the individual we as a commission chose is Dr. Lyle Foster. Lyle brings to us a wealth of experience. Now, I'm sure that this one is testing that wealth of experience as it has the rest of us. But it gives me great pleasure now to invite Dr. Lyle Foster to the podium, who will give you more in detail.
Thank you for those kind words, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being present this morning. I am Lyle Foster, Grant Administrator for the CARES Grant with Greene County. I would like to begin by thanking everyone for their dedication to the CARES relief process. Presiding Commissioner Dixon, Commissioners Bench and Russell for their leadership and vision with the implementation of the CARES relief process. I would like to also mention the dedication of the CARES administrative team at the county as well. Chris Coulter, Jeff Scott, Cindy Stein, Justin Hill, and Donna Barton. A few years ago, I had the privilege and a lot of time to be part of the budget task force, and I was impressed at that time with really what I would call the very efficient and lean operations of our county government. But now being on the inside, I am more impressed than ever with really how streamlined the operations of our county government and administration in fact are. I think it is also important this morning that I mention the process envisioned by the County Commission has been an ambitious one in that it has outlined a funding path that means even the county will go through the application process and they themselves are applying last. As I have researched how these funds have been allocated in other parts of the country, this has not been the case in many places, as well as using a committee of citizens to have an important role in the funding allocation process. This does allow for transparency, and it also gives our community the opportunity to have a stake and a voice in the decision-making process, and I think this is commendable. This is a remarkable and noteworthy process, I can certainly say. We are experiencing a substantial amount of interest in the CARES relief funding process, and obviously we anticipated that. And we want you to know this morning that the process is well underway. We understand also, of course, with the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, our community has been hurt, is hurting, and we want to respond. So in terms of some updates, as of this morning, 97 applications have been completed, 164 organizations and entities have registered in the online application process, 51 are in process, and 16 have registered but not started the actual application process. As you heard from Commissioner Russell, this is kind of what we call a rolling basis. So now, starting today, healthcare will apply, then small business, then education, and then of course taxpayer-supported entities. We don't know how many applications we're going to have in total, but obviously we will make that public as they come in. But this is what we have as of this morning. There is an informational sheet on the CARES relief tab on the Greene County website. I brought that with me, and I wanted to maybe just give you a couple of examples of some of the things on that actual information sheet. So for example, one of the big questions, is there a deadline for submitting the CARES application? There is no formal deadline for the application itself, but obviously as soon as funds are expended, there'll be no more applications taken. We just don't know at this point for each application window if all of those funds will be expended. So obviously we are encouraging entities to apply during those initial funding timelines so we can get that request to the committee. Organizations will in fact be notified by email of the decisions by the subcommittee and as it goes to the advisory council and ultimately to the Greene County Commission. As they mentioned, there are 5 different funding categories, so each category will have a subcommittee that will be reviewing it. Our initial meeting of our advisory council will be taking place virtually next week. Once that initial meeting takes place, then those 5 subcommittees will begin their work. So we're doing what we call a rolling review process. So our nonprofits, organizations, community organizations, they've already have applied. We're now receiving healthcare. So those 2 subcommittees will meet immediately and begin their review of all the applications. We take their recommendations, give them to the advisory council. The advisory council will make a formal recommendation to the commission. Obviously, one of the questions is, well, once the commission decides, how soon before there's any funds getting back to those organizations? We're hoping if everything goes smoothly, approximately a 1-week period of time, once the commission makes their decisions. We will be requiring documentation from those entities once they get their funding awards, and as they submit their documentation, then of course the purchase process will begin and they'll get their funding awards. They'll have the option of coming in to get the check, or the check, as they say, will be in the mail. I think in many cases, people will want to come into the county offices and get those checks, and obviously we are very happy to do that. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to us that we get these funds out into the community to people who have been impacted adversely by the COVID-19 pandemic. We know these funds are very important to all segments of our community, and we want them to receive these COVID-eligible funds. I'm going to go back to the side, and Donna's going to come at this time to see what other questions you have from the media. Thank you.
Before we start taking questions from the room, we had a couple of questions come in prior to the press conference today. This question, Dr. Foster, would probably be best for you. Can you explain why this process has taken longer than some might expect?
Thank you, Don. I think Commissioner Bench has begun to address that. We've had several updates from the U.S. Treasury Department in terms of what some of the funding specifics were. And obviously our commission is very concerned because these funds are going to be audited, that we make sure we're in compliance with all the guidelines. As I came on board, I've also been in some of those calls myself. And one answer would be the requirements actually have been changed and updated. And so we want to make sure we were operating with the latest requirements. The second piece would be we had this online web application process built in-house. That is a very tremendous and demanding effort. And I really want to compliment our IS department on the detail. They worked extremely hard to make this happen. And getting that operational was a very, very significant task that's now been there. And then we also wanted to get this advisory council in process. So it's really the process that we wanted to implement, to be transparent, to be open, and to get citizen input. But that online application process was a very significant piece as well. Thank you.
One more for you, Dr. Foster. Do private schools or universities qualify for application? And what about churches?
Thank you, Donna. Churches, communities of faith are eligible to apply for CARES funding, and educational institutions, there is an educational window. So yes, higher education as well as private schools are eligible to apply. A number of these things are addressed in the CARES Relief tab on the Greene County Mo website under the drop-down box that says information sheet, but yes.
This one is a little bit outside of the exact CARES Act, but it's for Commissioner Dixon. Will the county be issuing a masking mandate? If not, why?
Thank you, Donna. I'm happy to address that question. Obviously, we support masks. We're all wearing them. We think it's a good idea. But further, I'll just point out that back on the 12th of June, the commission unanimously passed a resolution strongly encouraging and recommending the wearing of masks when social distancing was not possible. We stand by that. We strongly recommend and encourage the wearing of masks. And we've also been vocally supportive of a variety of approaches throughout the county and throughout the region where those are appropriate. And we've certainly been supportive of our partners, our wonderful partners at the City of Springfield, specifically due to the increased density of population. To answer the question a little bit more directly, the commission actually has limited enforcement authority under state law. We are not a home rule county. Charter cities or home rule cities, and actually cities in general, do have a little bit more authority for enforcement under state law. For example, we cannot fine a business. The ordinances that we adopt on things like planning and zoning, we are only allowed to adopt those and enforce those because we are specifically given that authority in state statute. We ran into some of the enforcement issues with the stay-at-home order, and we feel like it's a better use of our time to be working on this process that we're talking about today and getting these funds out in the community rather than attempting to bring folks in to court on a contempt motion that may or may not be enforceable at all as well. So again, we are supportive. We have made that very clear unanimously, and we'll continue to support efforts throughout the community to address this COVID crisis.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's take some questions from the room. Thank you all for being here today. We enjoy seeing your faces in person, so Katie, we'll start with you.
Okay, this is for one of the commissioners. No one's probably going to want to answer it, so whoever draws the short straw. I've heard some criticism from especially people in other counties about the way that this money was handled. Like Commissioner Bench mentioned, it just kind of got dropped on the county's lap, and we are better equipped probably than a lot of other counties to handle the disbursement of this money. Do you think that this was the right way to do this, or do you think it would have been better to do it as in pandemics past, like the H1N1 pandemic, where money went directly to the health department and other relief money went elsewhere?
Commissioner Bench.
That's a very good question. First of all, it is a major task that was dropped in our lap. But having said that, I think I have to compliment the state for doing it, because if this would have been left up to the state, we would be nowhere near where we're at right now. So I think maybe in retrospect, that was a good question, a good decision. Now, having said that, you are correct in your question. Many counties are really struggling with this. We know that because now they're calling us and saying, will you share with us the protocol and the type of software, the computer system development, everything that you all have done to see if we can use that and don't have to go through the same process ourselves. Quite frankly, I don't have a number on the number of counties that have called us, but there are several, and they are continuing to. I think that's an attestament to the ability and the dedication of our staff to rise to the occasion. So in our case, probably that money is going to be in the community working much faster than if the state would have done it themselves.
And if you could stay there for a second. As a former health director, a lot of health departments across the state aren't directly under the county, they're under health boards. Do you think that it would have been better, though, to send money directly to those health departments instead of through the counties?
I can't speak for every health department, nor should I. But I will tell you this, they are inundated with what they're doing right now. I do not see how they could have taken on this job and done what they are required to do under public health law today. So consequently, I think that would have been an extreme undue burden placed upon county health departments.
Any other questions?
The governor the other day kind of stressed that K County's got this money months ago. Hurry up and get it out now for testing, for education, for contact tracing. What would you guys say to the governor's comments, just pushing counties to get moving, and those things that he was saying it should be for? Is that accurate? Or what can you say about that?
Well, I didn't hear the specific comments, but I'll tell you, we're in regular communication with all of our partners, and we view them that way. And of course, the directives that we have, that the legislature and the governor endorsed with his signature, came from the U.S. Treasury Department. So we're going to follow those directives, and we're mindful of the audit. And we're also respectful, and we know that the governor has a lot on his plate, and we appreciate everything that he has to do as well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have a question for Dr. Foster and then a couple for the commissioners. Dr. Foster, I'm just curious if you can give us a few more details about how the committee and subcommittee members are actually meeting. How are they sharing documents since we're all social distancing and staying at home?
Good question.
Thank you for that question, and obviously we have given it a lot of thought. So all of our meetings are going to be virtual. Keep in mind that out of the advisory council, which is of 30 members, it breaks down pretty neatly into 5 committees of 6 individuals each. And so those subcommittees are groups of 6, and we'll be using those meetings through a virtual process. There will be kind of an organization meeting next week for the entire advisory council. And then I have the wonderful task of really giving what I would call some training with each of those subcommittees. And so in our initial meeting, we'll be looking at the application process and trying to explain to the advisory council how that works. And obviously, the advisory council is being broken down into their areas of expertise and experience. So our commissioners have chosen some outstanding members of the committee, so they really are anticipating to hit the ground and running. Then we're going to have a PDF file that they will lovingly receive, which will probably have 80, 90, or 100 applications. So I want to emphasize this role, this task that our advisory council is taking on is a very substantial one. I'm expecting, of course, to go through all of the applications, which will probably be at least several hundred. But then, and that's one of the reasons why we're using the subcommittees, because we don't want the advisory council members, each one, to have to go through maybe 500 applications. So they'll go through individually. There's a ranking or rating sheet that we'll be giving them and that they will utilize. And then that subcommittee will come together and they will share with their decisions, and then we'll take those to the advisory council. So obviously there's going to be some give and take when that subcommittee meets in terms of what are those funding recommendations that then go to the advisory council. But we think this is a good deliberative process. And one thing about the advisory council, they've got their ears to the ground. They know in terms of how businesses have been impacted. They know the community organizations that are behind in their funding expectations but have an even greater need than ever. So that's what we're relying on them for, and then their recommendations will go ultimately to the commission. Thank you.
You might mention conflict of interest.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Presiding Commissioner Dixon. He wanted me to mention that just for transparency's sake, each member of the advisory council will be signing a confidentiality statement as well as a conflict of interest statement, and we'll have those on file within the Greene County Commission offices. The conflict of interest statement generally means if they, for example, may have served on the board or maybe have some family involvement with, because they don't know who's applying, that they find that there's an application they've got maybe more than an arm's length separation of involvement with. So they'll sign a conflict of interest, and so they won't participate in terms of a vote for funding. So that has been considered, and a process is in place. And then they also get a roles and responsibility document. So coming on the advisory council, they all got a nice email from our presiding commissioner that said, welcome. And then they got a lot of attachments that said, now here's the work ahead of you. Thank you.
And I have a question for probably best for one of the commissioners. If citizens want to see how these taxpayer funds are being spent, how can they find out that information without going through the steps of filing a sunshine request?
I can partially answer that. We're going to have a transparency portal as a part of the Greene County website, and that will also have information there on the applications and eventually the amounts awarded.
Okay, and then another, probably for the commissioners as well. Can you talk about just a little bit about the checks and balances that you have set up so that there's not a conflict of interest when, for example, county entities are applying for these funds?
Do just a little ritual here. That's a great question, and really in the same spirit of the conflict of interest statement that Dr. Foster talked about, not only will they not be voting, but they won't be advocating. And the county has really taken the unprecedented step in comparison with other processes like this. We didn't pull the funds off the top to even administer or like a processing fee. We're going to be applying for all of the reimbursement for that at the end of the process as an applicant like everyone else. And that will all be done on the application. We won't be voting. We won't be advocating with the subcommittees. They will be making a recommendation. And bear in mind that governmental entities covers a lot of organizations because we have 9 municipalities. We have 8 or 9 fire districts. We have a number of, I think, almost that many school districts in the county. And there may be some overlap if organizations, if there's funds available in, for example, education, but it's, they're a unit of government as well. And the same with, for example, public health. That will all be left up to the committee. And the commission will look very, very closely at the recommendations that come from the committee. Yes, we have to make the final vote, but the whole reason we set up the committee is because we want the input of these very, very professional people in our community.
And lastly, to
Sure.
follow up, Commissioner, Can you talk about the steps that may occur between the moment the advisory committee makes its recommendation and the decision that the commission actually makes, and what might influence the commission to decide otherwise or to send it back? Have you even gotten to that point yet of how that process will work?
Well, it will be done with all due deliberate speed, but I will say that you used the word influence, and I would just say the commission will be very mindful that we ask these members to serve because we want their influence. We hope that citizens will not attempt to influence the advisory committee. We're not going to sequester them like a jury, but we hope that they will operate in that same spirit because we ask for their influence. And so the commission will respect that as well.
Just one final thing, in addition to the handout of the advisory board members that you received today, we'll be getting that up on our website as well, so the community can view not only who the advisory committee members are, but their backgrounds and bios. Any other questions? All right, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.